morning, Woodland School. Today is May the 5th. Yes, it's 5/5/2020, and I'm thrilled you are here. Well, let me give a great shout out right out of the gate to the Woodland PTO. What a surprise yesterday. Working down here, it's very, very isolating. It's, kind of sad at times. I try to keep myself chipper and try to keep myself upbeat. But what a wonderful gesture of kindness from the PTO yesterday. Received an Amazon gift card that was so sweet for Teacher Appreciation Week. So we are thrilled by that, my family. We will certainly put that to good use for the family in some way. Thank you to the PTO. And obviously, that comes out of all of the membership dues that the parents pay. So thank you so much for that awesome gift card. But then again, every week is Teacher Appreciation Week. But I digress. All right, in news today on this date in history, May the 5th, in 1961, yes, Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space. Flight lasted very, very short period of time, but 1961. And in 1971, not on this day, but 10 years later, he wound up walking on the moon. So how cool is that? The first American in space and then later walked on the moon. In 2002, fast forward a few years, Spider-Man debuted in the box office. Yes, the first Spider-Man movie. And it was the first $100 million opening weekend movie. Hard to believe, actually, because I really feel that if ticket sales were what they were for some other movies, you definitely would. Like, for instance, Titanic, the movie. Please, if you haven't watched it, make sure you talk to your parents first. But iconic movie from when my wife and I first started dating. I think that movie came out like 1997, 1998. I apologize if I have the date wrong. But that movie was extraordinary, and I'm sure that if ticket prices were what they were at that time, it certainly would have done even more. It would have had a more impacting opening weekend. In 1821, Napoleon, yes, the French ruler, who tried to stretch his reign throughout Europe, he died in exile on the remote island of St. Helena. And yes, quite the news story today. Just 3 items. Birthdays today. Rolling in the deep. She's not rolling in the deep. Deep pockets, maybe. Adele turns 32 today. You like that one, huh? 32 today. So feel free to throw a little Adele on your playlist this morning. You might want to say, hey, Alexa, play some Adele. Anyway, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. We go crazy in this house over Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Yes. It premiered today in 2006. That's all on the news front. On the education front, which is why I'm really here. Math, you'll notice that there are 4 problems similar to yesterday that I pushed out. Please take notes. I recommended this yesterday. What you can do is you can write the word problem down, take the note, then try and solve it on your own. See how far you get. I will tell you that slides 1, 2, and 4 are what I call meet expectation problems. Slide 3, slightly more elevated. I would probably put that in the category of exceeds. It depends upon your comfort level, of course, with all of this. So give them a try. See how you do. There is no formal work today. This is your work, these 4 problems. So if you want to listen to me present them, it's about 23 minutes long. Please watch the video. And then when that's done, rewind it, write the problems down, and then try and solve them on your own. Or right at the start, write down the problem and try and solve it. Maybe you try and solve it and you get halfway there, and you're living on a prayer. But it's totally up to you. Maybe you get 3/4 of the way and you just can't execute the final step. See how far you can get before maybe learning breaks down, or maybe you surprise yourself. In social studies, you'll continue what you started yesterday. And in reading, boy, I've got a gem for you today. 2 hours over the next 2 school days. That's Tuesday, Thursday. I want you to pretend you are one of 2 English immigrants, orphans, leaving England and pretending that you are now documenting the last 3 hours of the Titanic above the waterline. Yes, you are rescued. You are sitting there in the lifeboat jotting down what just happened. Obviously, if there are any questions, please join me on Google Meet. I'll offer hours right away at 9:45, 9:50. So it's going to be a Tuesday, Thursday, epic, epic journal entry. So please, I pushed out a new doc separate from the project that we're working on. You know, you're going to take in the sights, the sounds, the tastes, what you hear. This should be your best writing of the year for me. Okay. Probably maybe one more assignment I'll give to you of this caliber where I'm expecting the moon. All right. So I'm expecting the moon. So take me to Mars. Got it? Let's go. I'm pumped in the studio today. Let's do 3 chapters. All right. I think we can get there. That puts us to page 110. So that leaves us Thursday, Friday. We pretty much can get this taken care of by Friday, and maybe I have to do a bonus reading. We'll see. Saturday, April 13th, 1912, 10:35 p.m. The huge mechanical appendage swung down through the bottom of its range of motion, passing inches above Patty's cowering form. "Come on out, lad," the engineer called. "You can't hide forever." Patty raised his head slightly, casting his eyes over his surroundings. Had he well and truly trapped himself here? The Titanic was so vast and interconnected that there was almost always another path. He spotted it between 2 pillars, a small hatch in the forward bulkhead. Even if it led straight to the side of the hull into the ocean, he had already decided to go there. He peered up at the armatures, timing their motion. The instant the head space was clear, he was sprinting for the opening. "Stop!" the engineer cried. But before the man could translate his words into action, Patty was through the hatch. The blast of heat nearly knocked him backward. "The furnaces! I'm in number 1 boiler room!" Spitting ash, he scampered past a coal bunker, risking a glance to the rear. The engineer stumbled after him, bellowing at top volume. Patty could distinctly make out the word "stowaway." Now, the fat's in the fire. He fairly flung himself at the access ladder, scrambling like a monkey. Within seconds, he could feel the vibration of perusers below him. A reaching hand grabbed his boot, and he kicked frantically, making contact with something solid. A muffled cry of pain, and he was free again. He scrambled up on deck and looked around wildly. He was on F now, just aft of the third-class dining saloon. Running along the passage, he glanced over his shoulder and counted 4 crewmen chasing him. The angry engineer followed by 3 stokers. The scene reminded Patty of a child's storybook Daniel had shown him about an English fox hunt. At the time, Patty had felt sorry for the fox. Now, I am the fox. It's kind of like the gingerbread man. He dashed into this darkened third-class galley, searching for a place to hide. There were nooks and crannies aplenty, but nowhere that he wouldn't be discovered by someone who was looking hard enough. The indecision cost him precious seconds. The door swung open, slapping against the bulkhead. Bright light from the corridor penetrated the kitchen. There was no time to flee. In another instant, the crewman would be upon him. Acting on pure, mindless instinct, Patty rammed his shoulder into a stack of crates. Falling boxes hit the deck, sending the engineer sprawling. The wooden sides splintered apart, and, all at once, 11 large cantaloupes were rolling across the deck like a wave. A stoker's boot came down on the spinning melon. With a cry of dismay, the man went down, bowling out the 2 perusers behind him. Sorry, pursuers. I knew that wasn't right, but similar. Pursuers behind him. Patty pounded through the third-class dining saloon, vaulting over long communal tables and benches. Back in the passageways, he felt the difference right down to the tips of his toes. The soft, thick carpeting, of a first-class corridor. Some of the Titanic's most luxurious features were on this part of F deck: the heated saltwater swimming pool and the legendary Turkish steam bath. So we come back to the steam bath from earlier in the series. Neither held the slightest interest for Paddy now. Escape was his singular thought. He knew where he was heading without consciously deciding to go there, as if his legs were under the control of a puppeteer. It was the one hiding place aboard the ship he'd hoped he'd never have to use. A place so cold, so dark, so dreadful that it made the hair stand up on the back of his neck just to think about it. Only if there was no other choice, he told himself when he'd first discovered it. At a full gallop, he re-entered the working part of the ship, jogging left and right as he made his way toward the prow. He could feel the bulkheads closing in as the hull tapered. He raced through the firemen's quarters, past sleeping stokers, trying his best to skim silently across the deck. When he saw the hatch, he pulled up short, almost choking on the lump that suddenly rose in his throat. The pounding feet in the distance made the decision for him. It was either the misery that lay beyond this hatch or the brig where the murderous Gilhooly's. No contest. He threw open the heavy door to be greeted by a blast of frigid air and the overpowering smell of lubricant. And there it was, the Titanic's anchor chain. A vast pile of enormous black links, each of them nearly Paddy's full height. He stepped out of the curved stout iron, finding it slick with grease. This was even more dangerous than he'd originally feared. He looked down. There was nothing to see but chain, folded up upon itself, all the way down to the bilge of the ship, some 40 feet below. Above him, the chain disappeared into the narrow shaft that stretched all the way to where the anchor hung on the starboard side of the prow. He straddled the link and wrapped his arm around another. Only then did he feel secure enough to reach out and pull the hatch shut behind him. The darkness was almost smothering, enveloping him like a black velvet curtain. He unhitched his suspenders and tied them around the heavy iron, hoping against hope that they would support his weight in case he slipped. He seriously doubted that they would. If he dozed and lost his purchase on the link, he would be bruised, bloody, and dashed to pieces in the bilge. By the time his body was discovered there, if indeed it ever was, he would be nothing but a pitiful pile of broken bones. Time passed with such agonizing slowness that minutes seemed like months. Paddy had no way of clocking his ordeal. And yet, he knew one thing for certain. He had to stay in the chain locker as long as was humanly possible. Second Officer Lightoller was not the sort of man who gave up easily. This search was going to take all night. He shuddered, which made the grease run up his arms and legs, and run up and down his legs. Run up his arms and down his legs, if I can read it properly. Paddy Burns had survived much in his 14 years. He was not certain at all he was going to survive this. Give you a moment. So he escapes, but now he finds himself in one of the most disgusting, nastiest parts of the ship, right? Just think of the juxtaposition of this, right? The opposites of this. You've got this luxurious ocean liner, okay, that they're all on in first class, right? Where it's luxurious carpeting and ornate things on the walls and these beautiful rooms and swimming pools and incredible amenities on board. Then you've got, second class, a step down. And then you've got steerage, where they are most of the time. And even steerage right now is looking like a picnic, right? So he's literally in where the anchor stored itself. Okay, he's in this disgustingly cramped area. An anchor will, fold in on itself, and then when it's time to then put the anchor over, all those chains will then sort of come undone as the anchor kind of comes down. So he's in this disgusting area, and I mean, any of that metal, if he falls, can crush him. He can die, and like you said, he may never be found. It's a wild scene. You think about the opposite thoughts going on there. Luxury of the ship, and he's in the most disgusting area that he can possibly be. Sunday, April 14th, 1912. We're now on Iceberg Day. April 14th, 1912. This is chapter 13, ladies and gents. 6:10 a.m. We are some 16, 17 hours to impact. It wasn't sleep exactly, but rather a frozen stupor brought on by exhaustion, bone-chilling cold, and the cramping of every muscle in his body in the effort to maintain his perch on the greasy anchor chain. The terror of falling had now become so old that he was losing his sharpness, even dozing a little, and disaster could be the only result of that. How long had he been in this otherworldly place? It was impossible to tell. Long enough to lose feeling in his arms and legs. If he ever got out of here, if he ever opened that hatch and returned to the land of the living, he was by no means sure that his body would support him. You know, you think about some of these game shows that some of these people have to do. They have to hold on to things. I think of like Big Brother, right? There's a show on usually in the summer, or even Survivor, where they've got to do these feats of strength. And this, you know, he's just a kid, right? He's holding on to this onto this chain, trying to just, you know, hold on to for life. This is life or death. This is not even a game show. You know, your muscles, you don't realize what you use when you're just holding on to something for dear life for many, many hours on end. They start cramping, you become fatigued, you become delirious. The hatch. It was then that he realized that he was looking at the hatch. Its edges were lined with faint light. That meant daylight, morning. I survived the night. For all the horror he'd already endured, this next move was surely the riskiest. He was about to open the hatch and quite possibly step into the arms of some stoker who would deliver him directly to Mr. Lightoll's swift justice. But it had to be done. 5 more minutes here and he might never recover, might not recover enough to save himself. He undid the suspenders that were holding him in place. They fell and he never heard them land. Then he reached over, unlocked the hatch, and swung the door wide. An instant later, with more pain than he'd ever dreamed imaginable, he was standing on the deck, trembling and faint with fatigue, with permission from Scholastic. But he was alone. By sheer luck, he had managed to find a moment in which all of the firemen were gone from their quarters. A shift change, perhaps. He took a step toward the door and froze. Slimy, lubricating grease dripped from him with every movement. A quick self-inspection revealed that he was covered with the stuff from head to foot. The urge to run, to get out of here before these stokers returned, was almost overwhelming. He fought it down. Begrimed with sludge, he'd leave a trail of black wherever he went. He stripped off his filthy clothes and stepped into the adjoining shower room. The water was nearly scalding, yet the heat brought life to his numb fingers and toes and eased the stiffness of his muscles. It was lucky that firemen used strong, gritty soap to combat the boiler's ash, because the muck on his skin did not remove easily. After much scrubbing, he turned off the spray, feeling strangely awake and alive. For Patty, a wash usually meant a swim in an ice-cold lake or river. Hot water and real soap was quite a luxury. He pulled on a pair of coveralls hanging on a hook, rolling up the cuffs several times at the wrists and ankles. Kicking on his boots, he strode out of the shower room and very nearly collided with the stoker standing by one of the bunks. Patty cast his gaze down to the deck. "Morning," he mumbled in the deepest voice he could muster. "How do you know my son?" the man demanded. "How do you know Alfie?" "Oh, Lord, Alfie's father." Patty toyed with trusting in his natural gift of blarney and tried to talk his way out of this. But more crewmen could be coming any minute. And surely some of them knew about last night's manhunt. Perhaps Mr. Huggins himself did. There was suspicion in his gruff voice. With a cry of, "I'm late," Patty dove for an access ladder and began a hurried descent, made agonizing by the aching of his arms and legs. He had no idea where he was going, possibly down to the hostile territory of the boiler rooms. No, cargo surrounded him, lashed to angled bulkheads. He was in the forward hold, just aft of the bow's peak. This means it isn't far to the baggage room. He dashed through the fireman's passage and burst through the familiar hatch. His exhaustion mingled with a surge of triumph. He had been on the run for 8 hours, but he'd made it. He slipped under the netting and crawled into the large steamer trunk that was the closest thing to a safe place he would ever know, aboard the Titanic. Curled up on Mrs. Astor's fine linens, he fell into the deepest sleep he could remember. Time passes. We're still in the same chapter. When Alfie was shaken awake in his bunk, he very nearly swallowed his heart. I told her. He saw me last night. But as he blinked, the sleep out of his eyes, he was relieved to find his father bending over him. Da? John Huggins almost never left the stoker's realm in the nether regions of the Titanic. Since sailing daily, Alfie, so now we switch gears. See, the author does a great job there making you think we're talking about Patty, but we're on Alfie now. Alfie had seen his father only once or twice outside the orange-black glow of number 5 boiler room. The ash-stained face looked haunted. Alfie, how do you know that boy? Boy, what boy? He brought water to the Black Gang yesterday, his father prodded. He spoke to me, mentioned you by name. He was in the fireman's quarters just now, but he's not one of us. What's he to you? Alfie chose to play innocent, but his heart was sinking. He'd always feared that his association with Patty would come to light. I don't know who you mean, he lied. There are many young crew members. Sometimes even the steerage boys help out for a few coins. John Huggins looked worried. I hope to God you're telling the truth, lad. There's talk of a stowaway. And if you've aided him, it's both our jobs. Where would we find work? Where would we ever find work again with a blot like that on our records? With a growing sense of dread, the young steward realized that his father was right. Alfie's own rash behavior and Patty's carelessness threatened to bring down all of them. New York was still some 3 days away. How would he ever keep this awful secret until then? He felt the bulkheads of the crew quarters closing in on him. Okay. We do have time. We will complete the 3rd chapter. I'm very excited about that. This chapter spans 6-7 pages, so I'll give you a moment just to kind of get caught up. Maybe take a little sip of water. Oh, that's funny. See, one of the kids posted, yes, I did say, Alexa, play Adele. And if you have, or hey, Google, play Adele. Or hey, Siri, play Adele. Yeah, I knew that would happen. I was wondering if it would happen to anyone. All right, let's go. Final chapter of the day, okay? And then we'll meet up on Google Meet in probably 9:50. Here we go. Sunday, April 14th, 1912, 7:45 a.m. Rodney, Earl of Glamford, was never pleasant in the morning. This was usually thanks to the gaming losses and the crashing headache he suffered due to overindulging the night before. Yet this morning, Juliana entered the parlor of their suite to find her father in a towering rage. I require an explanation of your behavior, miss, he demanded harshly. I have no idea what you mean, Papa. Do you not? He raged. Before you craft a proper lie, you should know that I witnessed your disgusting display. Down in steerage, no less. Juliana worked hard to keep her expression neutral. Papa must not be allowed to see her humiliation at being exposed, indulging in a pastime unbecoming of the daughter of an earl. Amid the chaos of last night and Her worry over what might have happened to Patty, the one thing she thought she'd known for certain was that her father would be deep in a card game, oblivious to all. Alas, not so. The old Juliana would have held her peace and taken the tongue lashing meekly, but she was not the same girl that she had been at the start of the voyage. Her friendship with Sophie, and with Alfie and Patty too, had opened her eyes. Instead of blindly following a code of conduct that was centuries old, why not accept people of all stations with an open heart and take kindness where you find it? In spite of the upsets of last night, she still remembered the glow of being welcomed into the third-class celebration. How peculiar, she ventured demurely, that in spite of your concern at my behavior, you were not waiting here in the cabin when I returned. How dare you? He retorted. So distressed was I at the sight of you flouncing around like a common scullery maid that it required some companionship to settle my nerves. 52 companions, no doubt. That is, I believe, the number of cards in a deck. Wow. Ooh. Sassy. For this time especially. She's really venturing on, the father, I think, at this time probably wound up smacking her. Let's see. Enraged, he raised his hand to her, but thought better of it when she stood her ground and did not flinch. Okay, because for the time period, spanking, hitting, no question. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but no less angry. Stupid girl, there are factors at play here that you cannot possibly begin to grasp. For some reason, she thought of Sophie's mother, Amelia Bronson's outrage at being denied to vote the vote. Until this moment, Juliana had not seen what was so important about casting a ballot for a prime minister you would probably never meet. Now she understood perfectly. What galled Mrs. Bronson, what should gall all women, was the belief that no female was intelligent enough to make her own decisions. Then please enlighten me, she told her father. I am not feeble-minded. Tell me these factors. Did you consider what would happen should Mr. Hardcastle hear of your dancing with swirling skirts? Challenged the Earl. Mr. Hardcastle, Juliana repeated. Your business associate is not aboard the Titanic. Do you not think these Americans gossip and spread rumors like fishwives? It should have read, do you not think these Americans gossip and spread rumors like fishwives? Her father exploded. Fishwives, what an interesting word. It's another one I've never used in my life. The entirety of what they call society is aboard this vessel. She lowered her gaze. I should regret to cause you embarrassment, Papa, but I fail to see how my conduct could have any effect on your commerce with a man who owns oil wells. Then you are extremely short-sighted. Hardcastle may be an American, but he will care very much about the reputation of the future bride of one of his sons. Arranged marriages of the time. Wow. Bride? Juliana was rocked back on her heels. I am 15 years old. In less than 2 years, you will be 17 and marriageable. Mr. Hardcastle has 3 sons. Not many girls get such a choice. I choose none of them, Juliana exclaimed, horrified. I warned you that you would not understand. Perhaps you do not notice the financial difficulties of your family because you are still kept in silks and satins. Hardcastle has all the money in the world, but only you can place his family within the nobility. So now I have children too, Juliana sputtered. It is your duty to rescue your family, her father lectured. That is what young ladies of your station are called upon to do. And if they are well bred, they do it gladly. Juliana had a brief vision of her mother weeping uncontrollably on the dock at Southampton as the Titanic sailed. She knows. Everybody knows except me. At that moment, Juliana would have preferred to hang rather than let her father see her cry. But the tears came. She could not hold them back. She stumbled to the stateroom door and threw it open. "When you invited me to accompany you on this business trip," she sobbed, "you neglected to mention that I was the merchandise to be bartered." Ooh. She ran blindly along the passageway, wanting only to get away from him. Never before had she felt so completely betrayed or so utterly alone. Here she was, half an ocean away from the only home she had ever known. Her sole companion, the father who had put her up for sale to finance his gambling debts and pay for his polo ponies, aeroplanes, and other toys. Who knew if she'd ever see her mother again? She wasn't even certain she wanted to. What sort of parent would send her only child off on a voyage of no return? Yes, she had wept on the dock, but her sadness had not given her the courage and decency to warn her daughter of her impending fate. Nobody cares what happens to me. She pulled up short, dashing the tears from her eyes with a balled fist. Someone did care. She thought back to the day that she, Sophie, found Patty hiding in the linen drawer under his bed. His exact words, "All that blather about your reputation, what I'm saying, miss, is there's something not quite right about it." His background could not have been more opposite of hers, but Patty cared. He had tried to warn her. These are her thoughts. "I've got to speak with him." Of course, she had no way of knowing where Patty was right now, especially after last night's hue and cry. But Alfie had told her that the stowaway had a secret hiding place in one of those Astor's trunks in the baggage hold. If she were to find Patty, it would probably be there. A little bit of time passes. Second Officer Lightoller was on the enclosed B-deck promenade when he heard the sobs. He prided himself on being a no-nonsense seaman. Yet an officer did not sail with the cream of British and American society without knowing a thing or two about service. Aboard the Titanic, an unhappy first-class passenger might well have friends in very high places indeed, in Parliament, in Congress, or perhaps even within the royal family itself. But when he located the source of the lament, he looked back. He stood back. It was young Lady Juliana, her face pink and tear-streaked. He could well imagine why. No doubt her father had torn a strip off her after her behavior at the party in steerage. Lightoller's lips thinned into a straight line. That was the second time Miss Glam had been found in close proximity to the stowaway. He would have loved to question her on the subject, but one did not interrogate the daughter of the Earl of Glamford like a common criminal. Not aboard the crown jewel of the White Star Line. As he watched Juliana's expression change from tragic to determined, and she began to move along the promenade, long strides that bristled with purpose, he followed at a distance. Uh-oh. She's the lamb being led to the slaughter here. She took the outside staircase down to the well deck and entered the forecastle at sea deck. Lightoller was intrigued. The girl was now in the working part of the ship, and she seemed to know exactly where she was going. Without slowing, the second officer pulled an able seaman out of the huddle of crew. "Come with me." The sailor fell into step behind him. "Where are we going, sir?" "We'll know soon enough." At a brisk pace, Juliana headed forward to the number 2 hatch and started down the spiral stairs, her footfalls reverberating softly on the metal. "Fancy lady to be mucking around the lower decks," the sailor commented as Juliana descended into the bowels of the ship. "She has a nose for trouble, this one," Lightoller agreed. "Now hold your tongue." He watched as Juliana left the stairs on the orlop deck and disappeared among the first and second class baggage. The 2 seamen trailed after her, walking lightly to avoid betraying their pursuit. Keeping to cover of the larger piles of luggage, they crept closer. Lightoller peered around a stack of leather cases. His eyes narrowed as the girl opened the lid of the enormous steamer trunk. A head and shoulders sat up in the view. The second officer sprang into action. Juliana spied them first. "Run, Patty!" But it was too late. Lightoller grabbed the coveralled figure by one arm. The sailor took hold of the other. The two men lifted the struggling Patty out of the trunk and set him on the deck, firmly under their control. "Well, now," said the second officer of the Titanic, do you know what we do with stowaways in His Majesty's merchant service?" And we end there. All right, ladies and gents, finished right at 4:45, 4:46. Perfect timing today. It's getting good in here. We only have, as I said to you, we're at page 110, and it only goes to 166. So 166. So we will have just 56 pages left. So I think I can definitely get that done in the next 2 days for sure. No reading tomorrow. Remember, it's a Wednesday. Have a great day with your field trip, and I'll chat with you all in a couple of minutes. I'll activate the link for Google Classroom Meet. Checking a few. Have a great day, everyone.